The first time it happened, I told myself it was harmless. Just a smile across the fence. Just a little extra wave when I saw him outside mowing his lawn. But deep down, I knew I was already crossing a line. My neighbor, Daniel, was the kind of man who drew people in without even trying. Broad-shouldered, confident, always laughing with his friends when they gathered on his porch. I'd watch them sometimes from my kitchen window, pretending I was busy with dishes when really my eyes were fixed on them. One night, while my husband was away on a work trip, Daniel knocked on my door. His friends were with him. 2 of them I'd seen many times, both just as bold as he was. "You alone tonight?" he asked with that easy smile that always made my pulse quicken. I should have said no. I should have closed the door. Instead, I stepped aside and let them in. And before I tell you exactly what happened next, do me one thing. Like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell, because what I'm about to confess is the most dangerous secret I've ever kept. Daniel and I had been neighbors for years, but we were never more than polite. A wave across the driveway, a short chat about the weather, the kind of small talk that hides the sparks you're both too afraid to admit are there. But when he showed up that night with 2 of his friends, something shifted. They all smelled like beer and cologne, laughter still lingering in their voices from whatever fun they'd been having outside. Daniel leaned against my doorway like he owned it, his eyes sweeping over me in a way that made my stomach tighten. "You really are alone tonight, aren't you?" he asked. I nodded, clutching the edge of my robe a little tighter. His friend Mark stepped forward, taller, with a grin that carried nothing but trouble. "Don't worry, we'll keep you company," he said. The third one, Jason, stayed quiet, but his gaze followed every move I made. I hesitated, just long enough to remind myself I was married, that this was insane, before stepping aside. "Come in," I whispered. The second the door clicked shut, I knew there was no going back. The living room felt different with them inside, too small, too heavy with unspoken things. Daniel sank into the couch like he belonged there, legs spread wide, eyes fixed on me. "Nice place," Mark said, wandering toward the kitchen. His grin lingered on me longer than on the decor. Jason didn't say a word, but I could feel his gaze burning into me. I tried to act normal, offering them drinks, pretending this was just neighbors hanging out. But my hands trembled as I poured, and when I turned back, Daniel was already watching me like he could see right through the act. "You look nervous," he said. I forced a smile. "Maybe I am." Mark chuckled. "No need to be, we don't bite. Unless you want us to." My heart skipped. I should have told them to leave. I should have walked away. But instead, I sat down across from them, robe tugged a little tighter, pulse pounding in my throat. Jason finally spoke, voice low and calm. "You invited us in. You knew what that meant." His words sent a shiver down my spine. And deep down, I knew he was right. Daniel was the first to move. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on mine with that mix of boldness and curiosity that had always unsettled me. "You don't have to play hostess," he said quietly. "We didn't come here for drinks." My breath caught. I glanced at Mark, who was leaning casually against the counter, his grin sharper than ever, and at Jason, who hadn't looked away from me once. Every part of me screamed to stop this, to walk them out the door, but when Daniel stood and crossed the room, my body betrayed me. He stopped just inches from me, his hand brushing the edge of my robe. My pulse thudded in my ears as he leaned close, his voice a whisper against my skin. "Tell me to go, and I will." I didn't. Instead, I let the robe slip from my shoulder, a silent answer that made his jaw tighten. In the next breath, his lips were on mine, hot, hungry, stealing every ounce of reason I had left. Mark's laugh rumbled low in the background, and Jason's footsteps moved closer. For a moment, guilt nearly choked me. My husband's face flickered in my mind, but the weight of Daniel's touch, the way his hands held me like I was his, made the thought disappear. It wasn't just Daniel anymore. Mark was at my side, fingers grazing my arm, daring, reckless. Jason's steady presence loomed, quiet but undeniable. And as I let them closer, as I stopped fighting the pull, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding all along. I hadn't just let my neighbor in, I'd let them all in. The moment I gave in, there was no turning back. Daniel's kiss grew rougher, hungrier, like he'd been waiting for this longer than either of us wanted to admit. Mark joined in, playful, daring, his touch bolder, his words sharper. Jason stayed steady, patient, as if he knew he didn't need to rush. His silence said enough. I was surrounded, caught between them, every nerve in my body alive with a mix of fear and desire. My mind screamed stop, but my heart whispered stay. And the truth? My body had already made the choice. Somewhere deep inside, guilt twisted hard. I thought of my husband, of the life we'd built, of the vows I was breaking with every breath. But the more I thought of him, the more I craved the way these men were looking at me, as if I was something rare, something irresistible. For months I'd been invisible, just a role to play, the polite wife, the clean house, the smile at the dinner table. But here, in this moment, I wasn't invisible. I was wanted, desired, claimed. Every laugh, every whisper, every stolen touch dragged me deeper into a secret I couldn't undo. And as the night stretched on, I stopped counting the wrongs and started drowning in the rush. Because once you've tasted what it feels like to be wanted like that, you can't go back to pretending you don't need it. When the door finally closed behind them, the house felt too quiet. My robe was back on, my hair a mess, my heart still racing like I'd run miles. I stood there in the silence, staring at the empty glasses on the table, the faint trace of their cologne still lingering in the air. For a moment the guilt hit me like a wave. I thought of my husband's toothbrush still by the sink, his jacket hanging by the door, the bed upstairs that was supposed to be ours. But right behind the guilt came something else. A thrill. The danger of it, the secrecy, the fact that I'd gotten away with it, it made me feel more alive than I had in years. The next morning, I slipped back into routine like nothing had happened. Breakfast, chores, polite texts to my husband asking how his trip was going. On the outside, I was the same wife I had always been. But inside, I carried a secret I couldn't put down. And it didn't stop there. Because once you open the door to temptation, it doesn't stay a one-time mistake. Daniel would text me late at night. Mark would wink when I passed him on the street. Jason's steady gaze promised things I couldn't ignore. Every glance, every message, every subtle brush of contact in public made my pulse quicken. I wasn't just living a double life, I was feeding it. And the terrifying part? I didn't want it to end. Days blurred into weeks, and what I swore would be a one-time mistake turned into something much bigger. It started with Daniel slipping over when my husband was at work. Then Mark found excuses to stop by. Forgot something at Daniel's, he'd say, but his eyes told the truth. Jason was different. He didn't need excuses. He'd just look at me across the yard, and I knew. Each encounter left me shaken, both from the thrill and from the weight of the secret I was carrying. At night, I'd lie beside my husband, answering his questions about my day with the same soft smile I'd always worn, while inside, my thoughts replayed every touch, every whisper from the men next door. It wasn't just the desire, it was the way they made me feel wanted, the way they looked at me like I was more than someone's wife. With them, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't routine, I was alive. But the danger grew with every step. One slip, one wrong word, one neighbor noticing something they shouldn't, and the whole truth would unravel. And maybe that's why I kept doing it, because the secrecy, the thrill of walking the edge was just as intoxicating as the desire itself. The guilt was always there, heavy in my chest. But every time my phone buzzed with a late-night message, "You alone?" I knew my answer would always be yes. It was late, the kind of night when the street is silent and every light in the neighborhood is off, except mine. My husband was out of town, hours away, and the house felt too empty. That's when I heard the knock. Daniel stood at my door again, but this time he wasn't alone. Mark and Jason flanked him, their expressions unreadable, their presence heavy. I could have closed the door. I could have pretended I was asleep. Instead, I stepped aside and let them in. What followed wasn't planned, and maybe that's what made it so intoxicating. The quiet house turned into something else entirely. Every laugh, every whisper, every brush of skin felt louder, riskier, more dangerous. The lines blurred until there were none at all. I'd crossed into something I couldn't explain, couldn't undo. Because that night, I didn't just let one neighbor in. I let them all in, at once. And it became the secret that I would never stop carrying. When the door finally closed behind them, I stood in the silence, my body still humming, my heart pounding like it didn't know whether to stop or burst. The guilt was instant. My husband's face flashed in my mind, the promises we'd made, the life we shared. But the guilt didn't erase what I felt. It only mixed with it, twisted it, made it sharper. Because for the first time in years, I hadn't felt like someone's forgotten wife. I hadn't felt invisible. I had been wanted, completely, entirely, recklessly wanted. And once you taste that, you can't go back to pretending you don't need it. Maybe you think I'm terrible, maybe I am, but if you've ever been lonely in your own marriage, if you've ever craved attention so badly you'd do anything for it, then you understand. So here I am, confessing the one thing I can never tell anyone else. I let my neighbor's friends in at once, and part of me, no matter how wrong it was, still doesn't regret it.